can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. With palms down. All right, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing today? Clearly nothing better to do on a Saturday morning than show up here. But I'm glad you're all here. Nice to see you all. I will do my best to bring my A game. Every so often I get a message from people, not calling anybody out, but they'll say, hey, I'm bringing so-and-so, so you better bring your A game. It's usually like a family member or a friend or someone they want to introduce to this crazy thing, and they're a little worried about it, so they want to make sure that I'm on top of things. So I did some extra preparations just to make sure I was ready for today, which was not much. So, why show up here? How does this practice, for those of you who've been at this for a while, how does it impact your life? How has it changed things you're doing or seeing or feeling on a day-to-day basis? How has this practice impacted you? Who wants to share?
It keeps me calmer.
Say again, sorry?
It keeps me calmer.
Keeps you calmer. That's probably a good thing, yeah?
Yeah.
What else, Eric?
I was actually thinking on the walk over here, an analogy kind of feels like a realignment.
A realignment?
Like, my, the habits of my mind kind of drift, throughout the week.
Yeah.
And then I need practice to kind of like hone it in.
Yeah. Thanks. Wake up. No, I saw you both hands up at the same time, so you two can fight it out.
You can go first.
This practice has helped me be more intentional with my words, with my actions and behavior.
Yeah.
I guess I'm moving more slowly, I suppose, less fast paced.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
For me, it's helped me be a little bit more centered, get in touch with my breath, both in breath and out breath. And I feel like coming here has helped me see that it's not about me. I see other people's experiences, and it helps me practice compassion, empathy.
Nice. Thanks. If we did a promo video, that would be it right there. We don't do that stuff because that would be weird, but if we did, yeah.
It's helped keep me sober for the past 5 years. Not so reactionary to things, more compassionate. Trying not to be so judgmental, that one I'm struggling with, and not being attached to my thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. Yeah.
Reminds me to be present.
Remind you to be present.
It's funny because before I came here, I was writing in my journal, and I haven't been here to speak. Anyway, it's helped me with a lot of breathing, anxiety. Again, thoughts, Grace said. One of the other things I wrote in my journal was that I have a sense of peace, and I'm not sure if it's the space, the community, the teachings, and perhaps it's all of it. And I actually think that's it. It's the community, it's listening to the perspectives and being able to find the center.
Definitely. Thank you. Anybody else want to share?
I've incorporated my daily practice on a regular basis, and I've been very diligent. And it was something you said once about if you just come once a week. And so it's prompted me to delve deeper. So it keeps me when I'm not here.
Right.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on the if you come just a once a week comment? Meaning,
Well, it just doesn't last as long.
yeah. No, I know that. I just wanted you to share that. Yeah. Because the way you said it made it sound like, well, all you have to do is come once a week. But
Oh.
the idea is that, you know, whether you come once a week, once a month, or never at all, doesn't matter. But you have to bring this into your life outside the once a week.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
the message there.
Yeah, and I kind of got that, so that's been a real benefit.
Thanks. Saw another hand somewhere. Well, yeah.
Well, I'll parrot what I heard Sylvia Borstein say one time, that I think I always was a kind person, but the practice has made me even kinder.
For sure. Thanks for being one of the kind people. Some people are just that way. Some people have to work really hard at it because it's not easy. Is there anyone who has a really hard time just being kind and nice? Only two? Okay, 3 hands. All right. Bunch of liars in the room. Do you want to elaborate on that at all?
Well, most of it's in my head, because I have good manners, and people think that I'm kind and caring. But in my head, I'm like, oh, you're a fucking idiot. And I smile. So I've gotten better at not saying, oh, you're a fucking idiot.
Nice.
And I just smile.
Yeah.
And the more I do that, the less I think people are idiots. So maybe they're not the problem, I'm the problem.
Huh.
That's
Maybe.
what I found out.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I think we should just close the day on that. 2 more, and then we'll move on. I think 2 more hands on those who have a really hard time being nice
Me at work.
at work.
It's a crazy environment, and it really puts me to the test. And like this gentleman, I'm like, people tell me I'm like one of the kindest people they know, but in my head I'm thinking, what is wrong with you? And probably not in a nice way. But it's helped me be more mindful of how I am responding to that. And so at least I'm paying a little more attention to the bad things in me and trying to let the good come out.
Yeah, great. And you both bring up beautiful points about the thoughts that are in our heads, and very often they're directed towards ourselves. Very often that's who we're the least kind to and the least gentle with and the most judgmental towards is very often ourselves. And then that gets projected out. Yeah. 1 more, I think there was a hand on who has difficulty being kind.
Oh yeah, for me, I think it just my de facto mode is to be critical, and also to just having a hard time in general accepting things that are out of my control. But I would relate to the first gentleman who said that I kind of present as congenial and respectful, but it's a lot of just internal dialogue. But when I can get outside of myself and just try to kind of mitigate that thinking, it helps a lot.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate it. All right, great. So with that, we'll go ahead and we'll sit. We'll do a meditation practice. For those of you who are joining virtually, welcome. Glad you're here. There's a chat box on your screen. Somewhere, feel free to say hello, or when we get to questions, chime in there. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. Somebody typed, my hand is up. Do you want to? Oh, you did share. I think it's Brendan. Brendan shared, it helps me to pause judgment and be kinder. Yeah. Thanks, Brendan. Appreciate it. So meditation, nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. I mean, you don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos, and this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable however you're seated. If you are on a cushion, often helps slide into the front third, pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Same thing if you're in a bench or a chair, however you're seated. Just trying to relax the shoulders, hands are on the knees or the lap. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts or you have an itch. So simply move, return to stillness. Most important is to understand you're not going to empty your thoughts, you're not going to stop thinking. You're going to continue to think. I will say things periodically to either wake you up or remind you that you're lost in thought and bring you back to the present moment. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed, whatever is comfortable. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus, to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. Most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. Imagine going a day without being disturbed by someone. Imagine going an hour without being disturbed by someone. Many of you won't even make it out of here before you're disturbed. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. It's not the escape that often people think it is. If your life is a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess, meditation doesn't fix that. It makes you become aware of it, so you can then make changes in your life. So your life is less of a crazy, hectic, stressed out mess. This is direct perception into the present moment. Not running from it, but being with it. And as we all have experienced in life by now, some moments are pleasant, some moments are unpleasant, and some moments are neutral. That's what the Buddha taught very clearly. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And our life is just moment after moment of these experiences. And so all this practice is doing is allowing us time to slow down, create space for us to look at each moment as it arises without judgment, without critique, without hatred, without anger, without frustration, without disappointment. But just be with it. And that's very difficult. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, and we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life gets a little simpler. But it's a practice. And what I heard from just about every person that shared is a very common theme of recognizing thoughts as they arise and thinking a little more before we speak and act. You may have not all said that directly, but that's absolutely what I heard, was people creating space to see what their thoughts are, an awareness of what their words are, an awareness of what their actions are. And when you begin to change what you say and what you do, your life drastically changes. It's not quick. It's not overnight. It's not a 6-week course that all of a sudden you get some certificate for, and it's just a daily practice. Because every day things will happen that will irritate you, frustrate you, and annoy you. I wish it wasn't the case, but that's just how life is. And so hopefully we are able to have more moments of being kind and gentle to self first and foremost, and then everybody else. So with that, I'll pause and really just prefer to respond to questions. Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that you're sitting with, and we'll use the rest of our brief time this morning, and I'll open up to questions. And for those of you who are joining virtually, again, welcome, glad you're here. There's a chat box on your screen somewhere. Feel free to say hello, and again, if you have questions, you can put them there, and I'll do my best to respond. So thoughts, questions?
I don't like that uncomfortable silence, so I'll go. I may be wrong about this, but I think I heard that this is like the 7th or 8th Buddha, and it's the Buddha of our era. And so were there ones before and ones after? And I know that Buddha means enlightened ones, so that all the Buddha was in, and we could find that. But can you elaborate on that, or am I mistaken?
What'd you read?
Mean what text did I read?
I'm going to go back to the very first words that you said, which was, I think you said enough of the uncomfortable silence.
I said I don't like an uncomfortable silence.
I know, I'm going to go back to that as your question, because that's the one that actually has value and meaning. So those of you who've been around me enough, or for many years, and I haven't shared this in a while, I see Jack, I know you, I used to talk about this a lot, but that moment right there, where I open up to questions, that's my favorite moment of this entire hour, where people are uncomfortable. They're not sure if they should raise their hand or not. They don't know what, I mean, you all have a billion questions, but that moment, people start looking down. They don't want to look at me. They're looking around. I get to see all your faces because I literally go face to face. The discomfort on your face, the awkward movements, the body language, like, oh no, will somebody just ask a question? And then somebody always caves and goes because they're so uncomfortable with it. I love that. That is the most real thing that's happening. Because everybody's fully present with their level of comfort or discomfort in that moment. And the longer it goes without a question, I shouldn't give away my inside tricks here, but the longer it goes without a question, I love it even more, because it creates space for people in a safe space to see just how uncomfortable they are. At what? At silence? Why is that so scary? We're just sitting here. And here's the crazy thing. You just sat for 20 minutes doing a quote unquote meditation without that feeling. And then all of a sudden I open up to questions, and after 10 seconds of silence, half of you go into panic mode. The other half, it takes 30 seconds. Some of you are totally comfortable with it, but many of you are not. Explore that. Because if you can understand that about yourself, you will understand and unlock so many maddening things going on in your life. It's just silence. But it's silence without some structured thing. The 20 minutes of silence that we call meditation, people are cool with. But then the 10 seconds of silence that didn't have anything else other than somebody asking for questions goes into anxiety, stress, worry, or whatever. Does that answer your question?
Doesn't it have to do with expectation though? Isn't that the key?
You tell me.
Second silence, and
Does-
that's what I think.
Say again?
There was an expectation with the second silence that you're waiting on someone to do something.
Who?
Well, I don't
Who
know.
planted that expectation? I'm not sitting here with any expectations. I just told you I love when we sit here silently. You ruined that silence and raised your hand.
So
I was perfectly fine without the questions. So ask yourself, does that have to do with the expectation? I didn't say I was expecting questions, did I?
No, I have the expectation that
Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute. You have the expectation that questions should occur? Yes or no?
yes,
And they didn't in the time that you were comfortable with. And so all of a sudden you went into, what word would you say?
irritability.
Irritability. So you got irritated, right? And I appreciate you. I mean, this is like, thank you, because this is goes on with so many people. You got irritated because in the allotted amount of time that you gave yourself without knowing it, a question didn't arise and you got irritable. Wow. And I'm picking on you, one, because you can handle it, and two, this is great for all of us. Now think about if just a little moment of silence in a period of time that's different than you were being expecting made you irritable. Imagine what happens the rest of your life that doesn't go the way you want it to. That's the real challenge. Our entire day doesn't go how we want it to. You know what the problem is? Not the way the day goes. What's the problem?
Expectations.
The expectations. Abandon them. All of them. And you will never be irritable. Yes, there are endless Buddhas. Next question. They call Shakyamuni Buddha Siddhartha, the one we refer to as the Buddha of this world system. I don't talk about this stuff because it doesn't really matter, but Indian cosmology, world systems, this Saha world as it's referred to, this is the world that Shakyamuni Buddha was born into. They call them kalpas, which are endless amounts of time, blah, blah, blah. So we get Shakyamuni Buddha, yep. But don't worry, when he's gone in like 1 trillion years, there's another Buddha in Tashita heaven named Maitreya, and he'll be born to continue to teach the Dharma. So we're good for about another 1 trillion years.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Or silence, either's cool.
So I was frustrated with my partner this morning. And I'm thinking my frustration is valid and it's justified. But now I'm thinking like, well, I need to change my expectations. But also sometimes shouldn't we have expectations of each other, like major things like racism? I have expectations of how people treat people. And I feel like that's valid. And I shouldn't lower that just because I'm bothered by it.
Right.
And maybe not with my husband, the frustration, but it was injustice what he did, you know? I was frustrated. And I didn't express it with super anger, just that I'm frustrated.
Yeah.
And then he came back with, you're spreading bad karma on me because you are mad. And
Oh, he went there.
Because he went to the family songa last week and now he knows all about karma, so he's.
Yeah. That's why I usually prefer not to know anybody who comes here because it makes it too personal. But let me touch on a couple things. First, racism, and then karma, just some gentle topics. Here's the thing with expectations. So what you're asking and seeing now, I want to try to separate expectations, especially in, loving, committed relationships. I'm not suggesting that you don't have wants and desires for how you want your loved ones or others to be, okay? I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't all have a deep craving and desire for racism to no longer exist. Absolutely, 100%. I'm just gonna talk about that aspect of it for a minute, away from the personal situation. For me, that's something that it disgusts me, that racial injustice is just embedded into our American culture. Like it is, permeates beyond, right? And this is coming from a privileged white view. It is there. And I believe every person should work diligently at doing what they can to cut through racial biases, racial tendency, racial ignorance. All of those things are critical. And we should speak up and we should have a voice and we should hope and want others will feel the same way. That is all very different from expecting people to be that way. For me, obviously, and I'm very passionate about that topic, but I don't expect, I have lots of friends who are just racist. They just are, right? Friends I grew up with, played sports with, hung out with, got buddies with in high school, and now we're 47 years old and they're just racist. I don't expect them to change. And I don't treat them with any less love and respect and care. Because those who are racist and have hatred and anger towards people just because of the color of their skin, they need the love and compassion and understanding. But I don't expect them to change. Do you see the difference between those two things? I'm also, for me, when I interact with these people, which is quite a bit, because you mentioned the frustration, right? The frustration, it's one thing to be frustrated because of their views. It's another thing to be frustrated because their views are not aligning with your views. Because that goes beyond just, racism as an example, right? It could be anything, just little meaningless things throughout your day. You have a view of something, you want it to be a certain way, the other person doesn't. And you're not only frustrated because of how they're being, you're frustrated because they're not being how you want them to be. Does that make sense? So I think it's important to separate expectations. And then, years ago I had a good friends and, into Buddhism and all that kind of stuff, and similar story where they got into an argument and she was really angry at him. And he was all on his Buddhist kick, and he's like, well, I'm Buddhist, I don't argue. You can't just throw out this karma card and say, well, I went to family sangha and, you should watch your karma, right? That's just nonsense, But at the same time, to take the other person's side for a minute, he's not wrong. It is your karma. What you think, what you say, and what you do. Karma is action, for those who don't know. That's all karma is. The word karma literally means action. And when Buddha taught, we generate karma with body, speech, mind, what we think, what we say, and what we do. So karma is not what goes around comes around. Karma is not what we get. Karma is what we bring into the world. Karma is what we give. So everything you're thinking, everything you're saying, and everything you're doing, that is your karma. Now, I'm not defending the way that he used that, right? But it also doesn't mean he's wrong. And not just with these issues, but with all things, we are all very good. Well, I shouldn't assume anything, but many people are very good at justifying why we think a certain way. And when we justify it, we then attach and cling to it. So I made a comment years ago that I know really shocked people, but I wish every racist would show up here for intro to Buddhism and meditation. I wish this room was filled with racist people, because they're the ones that need to hear this. That's my view. So, yeah. It's really easy, and again, I'm not referring to this specific situation, but it's really easy, I call this Buddhist arrogance for those who get into meditation and Buddhist practice, to then think that we are above others because we read some Pema Chodron book and we're working on self-compassion and love and kindness. And we can, if we're not careful, very, very quickly spin that into anger or hatred or disappointment in others, because we now carry our little, meditation Buddhist class badge on our shoulder. And we think that like means something. But we have to be really aware of how quickly we're judging others. And also not forget that many of the things that we're judging them for, and again, I'm not talking about this specifically, just anything in general, are things that we were doing like 3 weeks ago. Now all of a sudden we don't do those things anymore. But we're so quick to judge others who do. So it's an honest, it's an opportunity to honestly check our own, true space with things. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing your A game, by the way.
I try.
You were saying something about frustrated with that they're not the way we want them to be.
Yeah.
And what's come up for me a lot, especially in that space, I wasn't feeling too uncomfortable per se with the silence, but usually comes up in that space is, how can I be, or phrase a question, or like the whole rehearsing thing, in a way that will come off in a way it's almost like a sort of personality perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And this is sort of stems from a lot of things in my life growing up, and to be a certain way, doing a certain thing, having to achieve a certain thing to receive love validation.
Yeah.
So that was sort of like what was coming up, and sometimes it loops. And then whenever I share, like right now, it's never what I ever intended it to be.
Yeah.
Ever.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's always better.
Yeah.
Because I'm just being authentic, and the kind of picture that came up in my mind, image rather, is like what you said in the beginning. This is all just it's reactions to the mind. It's not what anybody's doing. It's not what's happening. And the image that came, I've always seen and loved this image of a bird in a cage with the door open, and it's just standing on that little perch. It could like go any time, but that cage with this door seemingly there closed while it's actually open, it's this constructed prison of love.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what came up, and
yeah.
I'll just finish with this. Speaking to my therapist, she's like, we just gotta keep it simple with you. She's like, just try doing the opposite thing. And like, I didn't want to share, and I thought I should have shared it differently. And now I'm just sharing.
Yeah.
And I shared yesterday in an open mic.
Yeah.
I realized why I like speaking in front of people is like the number one fear.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I usually try to repeat everything for those joining virtually, but that's going to be a tough one. So I hope you just heard that. But what you're really, I think, addressing is, in Buddhist teachings a lot, get at this overwhelming fear that we carry around with us so many situations, self-doubt. And it really does come back to, the Eightfold Path, very fundamental core Buddhist teachings, right? The first one is the Four Noble Truths, life is suffering, number one. Second is the cause, greed, anger, ignorance. We overcome that with generosity, compassion, wisdom. The third noble truth is the ending of suffering, liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering. And the fourth is the path. And this is correct views and thoughts and speech and action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, concentration, all of that's on Google for free. You're good to go, right? But the first one, those do go in order. And the first one is to have the correct view. Because whatever your view is, that dictates everything that follows. And if your view, specifically referring to the view of yourself, is filled with negative thoughts or anger or hatred or whatever it might be, self-doubt, all these just perceptions of self that are, as we always talk about, are a complete delusion. They're not real. They're just your stories that you've been stuck telling yourself your entire life about who you think you are. And then those stories just sit there and sit there and sit there, and you begin to believe them. And so right view is recognizing that your view of yourself is not correct. They're just stories you're tied to. You're not the nice person or the mean person. You're not the good person or the bad person. You're just a human with a ton of life's experiences, and some of them have been incredibly traumatic and painful, and some of them have been filled with joy and beautiful moments and everywhere in between. So if we can have the view that pulls us out of all these, like you referenced, stemming from childhood. So if something stems from childhood, you know how long you've been telling yourself that? Since childhood. That's a long time, So the practice would be to really just abandon that view, because it's not correct. And yet we do things day in and day out that just reinforce that. And this is the Buddhist teachings on non-self. Without getting too far into this right now, to me, I think the most beneficial way to put non-self into practice, the teaching of non-self, is to understand that your perception of yourself is completely different from who you are. And for whatever reason, most people don't sit around all day telling themselves they're kind and wonderful people. At least not the people that show up to places like this. Not for everybody, but some. Some people have been torturing themselves for a long time. And some are willing to admit that. And that's a really big first step. And some are just still denying that because they're even afraid to be honest with themselves. So, other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So just to follow up on the non-self, because I've been doing a lot of work in this area, reading about it. So the point of it, I think, as I understand it, is that our sense of self, our ego, that whole thing is what really is what's leading to our suffering. So the more we can let go of that, the less we're going to suffer. Is that
100%?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's all of it. All of, whatever words, whether we use, the Buddhist Pali, Sanskrit words, whether we use Western, psychology words of ego and things like that, our identity that we have given ourselves is the root cause of all suffering. It is the greatest form of attachment in the Buddhist teachings, which is the attachment to the sense of self. Our entire world revolves around whose view? Whose view have you been building and defending your whole life?
Your own.
Your own. That's a really hard thing to set down.
Have you been able to experience in meditation or in your life
No.
a sense of non-self?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Never.
Yeah, never.
Ever.
Yeah.
Nor will I, nor do I try to. Because the actual, hang on,
Yeah.
before you immediately,
Not disagree.
the actual effort and attempt or goal or aspiration of achieving non-self is the greatest illusion of them all. Because that would assume that there's some self to experience non-self.
That is the paradox.
That is the paradox. That is the Heart Sutra. That is the Diamond Sutra. That is the core of Buddhist teachings. That we live in this dualistic world. And the more we try to escape the sense of self, the more we're actually abiding in the sense of self. There is no self to escape from. There is no self to escape to. There is only present moment. Glad that clarified everything for everybody in the room. Yeah. But yeah, that's it right there. What else? Do one more thought or question before we wrap up. Yeah.
I had a thought related to the self comment. I was at like a kind of a gathering like 10 years ago. I grew up with chronic illness, and this was other people with the same thing. We got sick throughout our childhood and tough times and all that. And someone had posed, it might have been a therapist or something, saying like, how would it feel if there was a cure tomorrow and we didn't have, all of a sudden you didn't have it? And like, we had a really hard time like wrapping our head around our concept of ourself after that point, like if we didn't have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I got chills when you shared that. So for those who didn't hear that, to paraphrase what you said, that you grew up with a chronic illness and you were at an event maybe, did you say 10 years ago or when you were 10?
Like 10 years.
10 years ago. And you were at a group gathering with people who had the same illness, and a therapist or somebody posed the idea of, what if there was a cure tomorrow? How would you see yourself? And if I heard you correctly, you're saying you and maybe the others, or many of them, or some of them, had a really hard time identifying with who you were or who you are. And I think that's a beautiful example of ours. We all have a story. I laughed for completely unrelated. I just had a movie scene pop into my head from the movie Swingers, which is totally irrelevant. But we all have stories. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. And that story is what we stick with. And this practice is not only about changing the story. That's the first step, I think, for most people. But not creating a story about yourself at all. I mean, what purpose does it serve? Just ponder that for a second to yourself. Like, what purpose does the story serve that you're telling yourself? Especially for those of us who share nothing but negative stories towards ourselves, about ourselves, which again is the case for so many people. But either way, if you just stop telling yourself anything about yourself, and you just did stuff. My master always said, just do stuff. Busy is the best nutrition, she used to say. Just stay busy doing stuff. Kind, compassionate, gentle stuff, non-harming stuff. But we can get so wrapped up, and this has come up a lot lately, and I'm not saying this to, if you're in therapy, please stay in it. If you're on medication, please stay on it. But we can often get so wrapped up in that process of identifying, fixing, curing, solving. You can spend 50 years in therapy trying to work through childhood trauma. And that stuff, I'm not suggesting is not important. I'm just suggesting you also see a potentially different view that says, yes, all of your past experiences have led to this moment. But if you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to understand every one of those moments, you're always going to be there. So I'm just suggesting another way of dropping the story and then see what happens. Not ignoring, not forgetting, not discounting all that's happened, or any, chronic illness or any experience. And also understanding how it impacts who you are today. But people often say, you kind of hear all these, motivational speakers and memes and social media posts about, write your own story, tell a new story. But what's the need to tell a story at all? Just help people. Let everybody else tell your story. They're not right either, but so. I'm going to close on that. Just wanted to see, there's a couple comments here. Oh, beautiful. So Peter shared, I just want to say hi from deployment. First, I want to say thank you for doing these virtual practices. Secondly, how often do you have these live practices? So Peter, the ones that we stream live on YouTube, Monday night, Tuesday night, and Wednesday night. Ken does a Zen practice Monday nights, 7 San Diego time. I do this Tuesday nights, and Alex does a loving kindness meditation on Wednesday nights. And then we do this again as well Saturday morning. So those are the live streams on the YouTube channel. And then pretty much everything on the YouTube channel has been for years. So you can scroll through archives of, the same madness is up there as well. So hopefully that's helpful. And then Cynthia shared, thank you really to everybody. Words that touched more than you ever know. So thank you all for joining virtually as well. We'll join palms as we close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. So a few quick announcements before y'all head out. And Peter, I should add, thank you for being on deployment. I appreciate it. Thanks all for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up this temple 16, 17 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who leave, we're not monks or nuns, we're not gurus or masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students, we're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night, as I just alluded to, we have different practices going on. We have quite a large recovery sangha, so we're battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be. We have classes for that as well. And family sangha as well, which apparently is a little dangerous these days, teaching about karma. So I have to have a chat with them. But other than that, just thanks for showing up. Buddha for You is there downstairs if you need anything. If anybody does want to, we had our Day of Silence retreat this morning, so they did a great job as always. We have that once a month, 8 to 12. So if 20 minutes of silence is torture for you, I strongly recommend you try it for 4 hours. It's phenomenal. You're stuck with yourself in silence for 4 hours. And last I checked, everybody made it out alive. So feel free to do that. But they did quite a good job cleaning everything. But if anybody wants to stick around and help weed or pick up stuff outside or, just stuff like that around the garden, that would be great. Thanks all for being here. Be safe. We'll see you soon.
Are you?